Hey friends, so this is a tutorial on how to put together your Owen Jones template for the final submission of Project 2. If you haven't seen Owen Jones's work, this is sort of what we're aiming for, so a big collection of patterns put together in a really well ordered gridded page. So the templates that you can choose from are on Blackboard. They are in the Assignments and Support Documents tab, and down the bottom you have the Owen Jones templates, which are currently unavailable but will be open to you very soon. So in there you have 3 templates. You can download them all and choose which one you want to use. Remember, you only need to fill out one, so don't go stressing out about having a million patterns. You only need to fill out one, which is roughly 20 different patterns, I think. And remember that you need to include both Illustrator and Cat's Eye patterns, not just one or the other. So you can just click right on here and they will download for you, and they are Photoshop files. I have created them in CS6, so they will work with CC, and they should be backwards compatible for CS5 at uni. If they're not, if you're having any issues, just send me an email at ebeaton@gmail.com and I can help you out with that. So I'm using template 3 at the moment, and this is what it will look like when you open that up in Photoshop. You can see we have the title, Modern Cultures. Leave that as it is, you don't need to change that. And then we have this green squares, which is where your patterns are going to be. I've also put in all of the guidelines, and this will help you when you're constructing the grid, when you bring in your patterns and you need to crop them down. So I'm just going to show you some of the quickest ways to do that. All of your patterns should have been saved out of Illustrator and Cat's Eye at 1920 by 1280. So I have a few of those in my folder here. I'm going to be using Christy McRae's patterns from last year. So you can bring in one of your patterns simply by dragging it across and placing it in Photoshop, or as usual going to File and selecting Place. Now these will come in at their 1920 by 1280 ratio, and with all images that we bring in from the web, remember you have to right click on the layer and rasterize that layer so we can edit it. So the first thing we want to do is assess whether the size of the pattern within this little square is big enough to see all the detail. You can see that here I have a lot of striping with my black and white, and if that isn't detailed enough, the one thing that you do not want to do is free transform this and scale it up, because you're going to lose a lot of definition and your image will become pixelated. So if you need to scale up this pattern so you can see it within the squares, I recommend going back to Cat's Eye and trying to replicate that pattern at a larger tile scale. So if we leave this as it is, one of the ways that we can crop this image down to this little square is to grab our rectangular marquee tool over here on the toolbar, and because we're using the guidelines, we can just check that in our View tab we are snapping to our guidelines. As you can see here, we're snapping to guides, and that means that when we draw with our rectangular marquee, it's going to snap into these lines and we can get an exact fit into the square. So that's selected the square. There's 2 ways we can do this here. We can Control X and kind of cut that square out, and Control V and paste it back in. So when I get rid of the big layer behind it, we're left with our perfect square, and we can pop that into the area. So that's one way. The other is to, if I just bring that right back, is to actually select the inverse of my square that I've drawn. So you can go to Edit and into the Select toolbar and select Inverse, or you can use the shortcut Shift Control I, and that's going to select everything but our little square. So when we select the layer and we press delete, it will delete everything around the square, and that is in place. So there's a few ways of doing that there, and all you really need to do is select your patterns and keep doing this for each of the squares. Remember that this is an editing exercise, so that when you're bringing these patterns in, just make sure that the colors you're putting next to each other, the placement, and everything that's within your pattern needs to relate to that narrative that we're creating with our tava. So just keep that in mind, and you may need to move these around a little bit at the end to make sure that you are creating something that makes sense. So yeah, make sure that if you are bringing in big patterns, you can always free transform and scale down, but never scale up, and just keep this editing in mind. But I think that's about it. If you have any troubles, again, do email me and we can go over this, maybe in the optional tutorial on Wednesday. Just remember that's at 10:30 and we will all be there to help you out. What you'll also get is the PowerPoint presentation for your final presentation boards. There should be some information coming on Blackboard for that, but the first slide really has all of the information you'll need. And again, if this isn't making much sense, you can email me, but I think it's pretty clear. So have a go with that, and have a good holiday. We've got one session left when you come back to studio, so we can go over sort of the press release and refine any of these details if you've missed out on something.